Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. This meeting will take place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. There are no additions or deletions to the agenda. So number 4, approval of the agenda. Recommendation that council approve the agenda for the April 22nd, 2025 meeting as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Strong, seconder. Councillor Babineau. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. Approval of the minutes. A recommendation that council approve the April 15th, 2025 meeting minutes as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Greek. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. Now, number 6 of the agenda are the real pleasant parts of these meetings. We have a nice presentation tonight. 6.1. It's for a young Lunenburg resident that is going away actually Thursday to represent Nova Scotia at the Atlantic Gymnastics Championships. And he's also going away in June representing Nova Scotia at swim championships. So it is my pleasure. And not only is he a good gymnast and a good swimmer, but I had the pleasure also of getting some lemonade from Liam this summer, and he makes one wicked lemonade. So it's my pleasure and honor to invite Liam Duggan up here. We're going to present you with a little plaque and a flag to wave and a pin. So come on up, Liam. And this is for your fans to wave around that. Okay, congratulations. And we're following. Okay, you want to put your name up there? Very good. I'm also trying hard to get another Leafs fan in town, so. So we'll move on to 6.2, Lori Fisher Fish Rehabilitation Project. Eric Croft.
Oh, because I'm Eric Croft. I was born at Fisherman's Memorial Hospital, Lunenburg. I grew up on a small dairy farm in First South, a few kilometers away. Along with managing the farm and raising 5 kids, my dad also worked here in Lunenburg along the waterfront at Lunenburg Outfitters. As a kid, I remember Dad bringing cans of milk into the Lunenburg dairy. As a kid, I remember the clanking of cans and the rattling of milk bottles. But it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized that I had been in the presence of Lunenburg royalty. Captain Angus Walters, the owner of the Lunenburg Dairy. I created Lunenburg Walking Tours back in the 1980s and have spent many years walking the streets of Lunenburg with curious tourists in tow. And then life gave me an opportunity I couldn't refuse. Leading tours through the Canadian Rockies, introducing guests to Niagara Falls, creating safari excursions through the Serengeti, following the great migration of wildebeest and zebra in Tanzania, getting soaked by the mist of Victoria Falls, or conducting tours in the city of Cape Town, South Africa. I have recently retired from world travels and find myself right back where I started, conducting walking tours in Lunenburg with Lunenburg Walking Tours. Right. Now owned and operated by Liz Powers, and just recently recognized as Lunenburg Queen's Tourism Business of the Year. Let me take you on a 1-minute tour of Lunenburg. We'll start 10,000 years ago with the Mi'kmaq encampments along the waterfront. Imagine the community enjoying the bountiful seafood available to them. Along come the Acadians, growing a few crops, but certainly enjoying the mackerel and herring that the harbor provided. Along came the foreign Protestants, farmers who turned to the sea. To fish, you need boats, and could Lunenburgers ever build boats? During Prohibition, we took our fishing boats and became rum runners. And now we are a pretty little fishing town with a UNESCO designation. The thread that ties the past to the present is fish. And that is a wonderful segue to what brings me here tonight. In 2002, the town of Lunenburg commissioned Laurie Fisher to create 44 fish. They hang on poles along both Lincoln and Montague Streets. They represent 20 fish and shellfish that were landed here in Lunenburg. Each pole has 2 labels, one identifying the fish and the other identifying the artist. When you wander the streets of Lunenburg, these beautiful sculptures add to our already incredible history. I can't think of one tour director that doesn't use these fish in their commentary. And I consider the fish a twofer. I challenge you to take a picture of those fish without capturing one of our beautiful buildings in the background. The fish have been hanging for over 20 years. In a casual conversation with the artist, Laurie mentioned that the protective coating on the fish has a lifespan of 20 years. As you wander the streets today, look up. You will notice that the brackets holding the fish have rusted. The fish themselves have faded. The labels on the poles have not weathered well. What would I like to do? Starting from the top, remove the brackets, give them a good sandblasting and freshen them up with a new coat of paint. Assess and repair any damage to the fish. Reapply protective coating. Replace fish labels. The labels are presently only in English. I am suggesting that they be upgraded to being multilingual, English, French, and Mi'kmaq. Replace the artist's contact information. How easy would it be to add a QR code? This code could take guests to both the artist's and the town's website. Clean up the poles. Oh, how messy and distracting they are. May I point out a town of Lunenburg bylaw? Except at a recreational facility to the extent expressly authorized by the manager of the recreational facility, or except as authorized in this bylaw, no person will post, nail, place, or attach any sign, poster, notice, or advertisement to any tree, telephone, hydroelectric, cable telecommunication, or other utility pole in a public place. I realize the poles are quite ugly, but I also realize that they serve a purpose. Take a glance as you walk down the street. There's a lot happening up there. I realize we have to work around that. But to dress those poles up, to bring the tourist's eyes upward to the fish, I'd like to see the poles painted traditional dory buff. With green trim, eye level with the labels. The fish were introduced to visitors with a sign at the corner of Montague and Blue Nose Drive, behind the public washrooms. I would suggest moving that sign to a more prominent site, more visible to tourist traffic. I realize this sign was placed in this area to also introduce Gracie. Gracie was gifted to Lunenburg by Laurie Fisher in 2003 as a 250th anniversary gift. As part of this project, I would like to see Gracie recreated and placed in a higher, safer location. What have I done so far? I have created a rudimentary inventory of fish, which poles, which streets. I have documented the condition of the fish and the labels. I've casually inquired of our MLA, Susan Corcoran-Breek, as to possible funding avenues. I've been in contact with the artist, Laurie Fisher. I've been encouraged by a few town councillors as to how to proceed. And how does this all happen? My mom would watch the Rose Bowl parade on New Year's Day, and she would admire the floral floats as they went by. But as the cameras scanned the crowds, she would ask me, Eric, where does everybody go to the bathroom? So it's all in the details. I would like to approach this project as a community event, a project to draw the townsfolk together. The town has so much talent to draw from. The Atlantic Canada Language Academy, for example, for assistance in the signage. We have the Lunenburg School of the Arts, Harborview Haven, the Blue Nose Academy, the Lunenburg Board of Trade. Funding, I would work with the town of Lunenburg, asking them to control, manage, account for funds that come forward for the project. I would ask the town of Lunenburg for ideas, suggestions, funding avenues I could pursue. Do I approach this fish one fish at a time? I would be working with the town's public works. Are there various poles that are scheduled to be replaced? Perhaps one street at a time? Should I spread this over several seasons? I have come here tonight with an idea, and now I have just asked a lot of questions. My purpose tonight would be to ask permission to continue. As kids, being in the family car, as we approached Lunenburg, this sign told us that we had arrived. I loved that sign. This sign stood where the Two Families Diner stands today, out on Victoria Road. For those in the know, that sign was made of wood. As the years passed, the sign became weathered and worn. The fish on the far right developed a rather bad case of nose rot. Rather than remove the whole sign, the diseased fish was simply tipped to hide the problem. That just endeared that sign to me even more. But eventually the sign rotted and had to be taken down. The Laurie Fisher fish are a town treasure. Let's not lose them.
Thank you, Eric. Does any councillors have any questions of Eric while you're there? Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Eric. I wanted to mostly thank you for the presentation and for bringing this issue to our attention. I know it's, I agree with you that it is, the fish are a town treasure and a very interesting part of our downtown core and something that we should look into. And but a question to you. You have mentioned, you have offered assistance, and I'm not quite sure, and maybe you're not quite sure, and that's part of the process as to what that assistance entails.
I am here basically to ask permission to get the town's endorsement to continue, to pursue, to discover how to go from here. I'm not asking for any funding whatsoever. I'm asking for permission to continue to create this project, to see it to its end.
Councillor Strong, do you have a question?
I don't know if Eric can answer this question for me, but I graduated from the art college and we had to take a course called contracts, and those contracts always seemed to flow when you gave something to a town or to an entity as to the future, whatever happens to that in the future, whether the town owes care to it or anything like that. And I'm just wondering if the town has the original file and the contract between Laurie and the town at the time, because that might actually require us to go ahead and do some maintenance work on it at this point. That's just my question, and I guess that goes to the town, not really to you, Eric.
We can look, and I was on council when we accepted the fish. It was a complete local project. It was done through Laurie and a business that was on the waterfront at the time in the Swicker building, I think is where they were located. And it was a project that the town received a grant, I think at the time, for signage and other things throughout the town. So I think they're beautiful, and I'd love to see them, fixed up and maintained. So I guess what you're asking is, can you continue to sort of organize this, put it together, probably come back to us in a few months and tell us where you're at that point? Because obviously down the road, if this proceeds and you continue, you'd have to work with us to get down off the poles and stuff like
Exactly.
that. Yeah. So, I mean, I would see personally no harm in having you continue your project. I actually want to commend you on your presentation. If you watch Dragon's Den, they always say, A1 on your presentation. Well, that was one of the best presentations I've seen sitting in this chair. So thank you. And one quick question, is Gracie still around? Because I thought Gracie was missing.
Gracie has gone.
For quite a few years, has she
for
not?
quite a few years. I remember her for maybe 1 or 2 years after the installation. And it's my understanding that she disappeared.
Yeah, I think Gracie might be in somebody's
backyard.
Yes, because I don't think it's been there for 15 to 20 years. So no, I just wondered when you saw the picture, I was like, wow, they found Gracie. But
no,
okay, excellent.
We haven't found
so
Gracie.
we'll need a new Gracie then, right? So,
and that's another wonderful thing. When you go investigating, you will find pictures of Lunenburg and you will find pictures of the fish. So they have made an impression.
Oh, they're beautiful up there.
Yeah.
So thanks again, Eric. And you can come back anytime or send staff an email. But good luck in your project.
Okay,
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Oh, Deputy Mayor.
I don't know if now, I was thinking of later in the meeting, but I wonder if we should make a motion to ask staff to report on how they would work to designate who and how that would happen. But it's,
So you want to do the motion now or later? So is Deputy Mayor prepared to move that motion?
I would just ask staff to report back to us on how it may be possible for members of staff to work with Mr. Croft and looking into on maintenance or maintaining the Laurie Fisher Fish Project in the town of Lunenburg.
It's been moved by Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Daphne. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Thank you so much. We'll move on to number 7, which is the public input and questions. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. Each person must state their name. Let's see here. Questions or comments are directed through the chair, and comments or questions are open to any municipal matter. So we do have 2 people that have signed up tonight. So we'll start with Brian Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian Arnott, 79 Pelham Street, and I'm here tonight to speak to the Towns Commission for the refurbishment of the bandstand in the amount of $345,000. And you're probably saying to yourselves now, oh no, not that guy again. What's he banging on about? And as you're going to hear, what I would like to do is talk a little bit about the history of the bandstand as I understand it from the research that I have done. The bandstand was originally on this property. So when the town hall was built, the bandstand was moved to the location where it is now, where it remained until 1940 when it collapsed. The current bandstand was built in 1987, so there a period of 47 years when there was no bandstand there. The bandstand that is there now bears relatively little actual resemblance to the original in terms of its detail. 2 main things. This is steel, that was wood. The profile of the original bandstand was very elegant, and it looks as it had a kind of cupola on it, and a flat part of the roof around it was in soft metal and probably even in copper. So I want to come back then to the issue that I brought up here previously in relation to the standards for the treatment of historical materials and properties in the UNESCO inscribed area. And again, just to remind you, no replications. The Venice Charter, standards and guidelines, etc. I think that the bandstand, my recommendation to you tonight, and I did distribute my notes here to council earlier, is that the project be put on hold at the moment, that it should not be rebuilt as is, that there should be some design criteria developed for whatever it is going to be in the future. So we have something here that is a kind of vague replica of something that had been there previously almost a half a century before. So there's a lack of continuity there. And anyone who wants to pursue this, the Eisner and Eisner Volume 1 has some very good pictures in it. So number one, my recommendation to council is to look at this in the context of how we approach things here with respect to UNESCO. We need to up our game. The second part of my recommendation here is that bandstands existed all across North America because every small town had a brass band. And you know, if you heard a brass band in a bandstand or outside, they don't address an audience. Big sound going in all directions. They don't need to make contact because that's not the nature of the thing. Whereas what we're doing here now is, in fact, you know, the Folk Harbor presentations, they're speaking to an audience. If you're in the bandstand there now and you're a presenter, very hard to make the connection to the audience because you're in this cage thing. So I think that a bandstand like this is not appropriate to the current function. And so I think that the review of it functionally, apart from the review of it aesthetically and historically, is merited. And that we should, and again, I'm very much in favor of a public performance platform venue, whatever, in the civic portion of the British Town Plan. I mean, it's entirely appropriate. I'm just saying that that bandstand probably is not worth the investment for a whole bunch of functionally, and it probably is not worth the investment in relation to you know, what we need to do to introduce new elements into this heritage inscription and heritage conservation district. So, Mr. Mayor, that is my presentation, and you have on record my notes, and be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Brian? Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Brian. I'm interested to know if you've spoken with any of the organizations like Folk Harbor that use the bandstand or have used it up until it was not usable with respect to the functionality.
I haven't, but in a previous life, I was a theater consultant and built 110 live performance facilities in Canada, the US, and abroad. And so I haven't. So that's an error on my part. But I do bring professional expertise to this. And I know that if you were to ask any performer, would you like a direct contact with the audience? They're definitely going to say yes. But you know, if the process were to go ahead, obviously other people would need to be involved.
Any other questions for Brian at this time?
Just make a comment. When we were council being paraded around town and during the fall and early winter, we toured all of the buildings that are owned by the town, and we found the cupola in Public Works storage down in the blue building. So I think it's worth noting that the cupola still does exist. It's not really cupola, it's a spire that blew off in a storm, I guess, when I was on the Heritage Society board, but that's there. That's just the point I wanted to make for whatever reason.
Anybody else? Just thank you very much, Brian. I remember actually 1987, I was in the high school band and we played, but they brought back alumni. They brought back a whole bunch of people because just to make, you know, make the best performance they could. And we performed there the grand opening of the new bandstand. So it's definitely dating me when you date the bandstand. So thank you very much. And no, I'm just looking forward to the community working together and coming together to get that bandstand rebuilt, because it's we definitely need it rebuilt sooner rather than later. But again, we want to make sure we do it right. So again, thank you very much for the presentation. And now, Jesse Ward.
Thank you, Your Worship Council. First, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fish rehabilitation project. I think that's an amazing idea. I have to say that if I'm up here. I'm here to talk about accessibility and inclusivity, which I think is a really important issue. And it has to be addressed sensitively, so I say all of this with respect. At the council meeting on March 25th, I asked several specific questions about the state of our electric utility and the future of it that remain unanswered 1 month later. This delay highlights a broader concern about equal access to information in our community. While my public questions on the electric utility that we all pay for have gone unanswered, I've observed that some discussions in the private Facebook group Friends of Blockhouse Hill have received prompt responses from the mayor over the last month, with some exclusive information and perspectives on town operations only available to members of this group. To me, this creates a two-tiered information system where those with access to a private Facebook group receive information that should be available to all citizens. So for context, it's important that Friends of Blockhouse Hill is a group organized towards preventing any sale of or development on lands on Blockhouse Hill. While this council has inherited a mandate from the previous council that some of the land on the site has been marked surplus, scheduled for eventual sale as a central initiative of the comprehensive community plan we are still committed to for now. This council will have to decide whether or how to proceed with this initiative, and I'm not here to make any recommendations or share my thoughts about that, but that's for context. The Friends of Blockhouse Hill group has only existed with an informal organizational structure, but administrators of the Facebook group have included Paula Rennie, who is on the Planning Advisory Committee, and Councillor Strawn. Mayor Myra has often shared exclusive information and perspectives on town processes and initiatives in this group over the last year. Of particular concern to me is a now deleted post in this private group from January 11 of this year by Planning Advisory Committee member Paula Rennie. Ms. Rennie wrote, in part, I would like to say that I have been advised that the majority of councillors do not want to see a project go ahead on Blockhouse Hill, given that our infrastructure is deficient. So this is a town committee member claiming knowledge of council majority opinion on a significant decision that hasn't been publicly declared, which points towards potential predetermination of a development matter before formal public processes have concluded. I don't like to repeat unsourced allegations, but this one I believe is important to have on the record and to discuss publicly. I believe that equal access to information is essential for public trust and for equitable civic participation. When information flows preferentially to private groups with particular viewpoints on town issues, it undermines public trust and gives the appearance of favoritism. So with genuine respect for all of you, I have these questions. When can residents expect responses to questions asked during the public input segment of council meetings? I know that sometimes it can take a long time, and this is outlined in the policy we have, but I still haven't received a response after 1 month. Will this council establish a social media policy outlining appropriate social media usage for councillors, similar to what Bridgewater and Mahone Bay have, that would ensure that official communications on town issues are on public platforms for accessibility and inclusivity? And would council clarify the current status of the Blockhouse Hill development project for all residents? This project hasn't been directly addressed by this council yet, but the motion raised by Councillor Strawn at last week's meeting regarding the UNESCO buffer zone development context and surplus lands reconsideration aligns with precisely the same concerns that Friends of Blockhouse Hill has raised regarding prospective development in the World Heritage Site buffer zone. So an update on the status of that initiative would be excellent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I guess I can, the first one, when can citizens expect a response? I guess the response comes from staff. So I guess my response would be when staff can find appropriate time in their schedule to get back to the citizen. We have had staffing things, some people off, things like that. So, I'm sure staff are still working on appropriate response. And I think really staff wants to give, when they give a response, they want to give the right, an accurate response, not just a response the next morning. Quite frankly, responses that I've made on the Friends group or any other group, I responded last night on Maple Leafs fan group. So, usually when I make a response, it's just as me, Jamie Myra, and quite frankly, if I see Paula Rennie's name or anyone else's name on there, I don't even realize half the time it's from the Friends group. I think it's their personal site. So I think it's a personal, public post until you highlighted it. I probably didn't even realize I was posting on the Friends group because I don't get a lot of their notifications. I just happen to see things. And as for Blockhouse Hill, quite honestly, this council hasn't discussed Blockhouse Hill for 2 minutes yet. So that tells you where it is on the radar of this council, along with the current action of the CPP. To be quite honest with you, we're working on a new strategic priority and a strategic plan that we'll be working on in the fall, which is highlighted in the strategic priorities. So I'm sure there'll be more coming on Blockhouse Hill, just that with staffing, of course, and issues like that, we're slowly working on our strategic priorities and plan, and we'll be getting to Blockhouse Hill, I'm sure, in due course, but there are no immediate plans to do anything on Blockhouse Hill, develop it, sell it, or not sell it at this time. It hasn't been discussed at this table whatsoever. So we're not hiding anything from anybody, and anything that was ever posted on the Friends group or any other group on Facebook, to my knowledge, has been stuff that's either been discussed at this table publicly or discussed just socially to your buddies, but it's been nothing that's been, we haven't been discussing anything like that in camera or in closed sessions or anything like that. So it hasn't been stuff we've been discussing formally as a group. It might just be our opinions, quite frankly. That's my opinion, I guess, or my response. If anybody else that was mentioned, Councillor Strong, you were mentioned, so if you want to respond, go ahead.
Jesse, just for the record, I have not been a member of the Friends of Blockhouse Hill for over a year now. And I have been adamant in all of our meetings, whenever casual or otherwise, that we need a social media policy. When we were in training, it was sort of told to us then, I guess, that we shouldn't be participating in private Facebook groups. And I regret that, because there are so many questions that could easily be clarified. And for example, the Lunenburg Community Bulletin Board, there was a question today about parking in downtown Lunenburg. And everybody was able to chime in except for a councillor who could have given them the phone number of Public Works or the town hall and gotten an answer on that. So those are just my clarifications. With respect to the motion that I made last week, or that went ahead last week, it's a separate thing altogether than Blockhouse Hill. It's relying on a 1994 document, and it's several parcels. Council never made a site visit. Council did not hold public information sessions or anything. And it's just a feeling, that it's my own personal feeling, and I think I had the support of council in making that motion. But that's it.
Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
I would appreciate understanding what questions are left unanswered, because I know you'd spoken in last time during the public opportunity session, noting that you had gotten responses, but they weren't satisfactory to you. So I guess is it sort of a fuller response of particular questions you'd asked that you're looking for? And I think it might be helpful to understand that.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may answer. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The questions that I had asked specifically that I was seeking an update on remain whether the town had joined the Electric Utility Alliance with Mahone Bay and Riverport, not joined, but whether there had been any communications regarding that, and if not, why. And I would have to pull up the original list, but in the email that I had sent and in the reply, there were some questions which I had remarked on the March 25 meeting as still remaining not explicitly answered. So thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to number 8, correspondence. There's just one item there, 12-month notice from the NSFM, fiscal impacts for 2026, 2027. It's just there for information, but I just would like to quickly highlight one item in there. Department of Justice is giving us notification. Basically, short and the long of it is there's going to be a total financial impact for all municipalities in the total of $8 million for new provincial police service agreement with the RCMP starting next year. And we have no idea what that means for us, but it does mean that you split the $8 million amongst all of us that use RCMP services. And when HRM is your largest group of taxpayers in the province, and they don't use RCMP for the most part, except for on the outskirts, I'm sure it's going to mean a significant impact to our budget. So I just wanted to highlight that part of the 12-month notice. It wasn't a love letter they sent us. It was a little disappointing when I read that part. So we'll just have to stay tuned, watch for notifications to come down when they show us what our financial impact is. But at this point, I just wanted to highlight it to council and to the citizens that we have been sort of warned that this is coming down the pipes. Anybody else have anything on that? Okay, we'll move on to number 9. There are no public hearings at this time. Number 10, just a quick reminder that those that are here are watching that next week, the 29th, is our first budget meeting, which is public input sessions. So please mark that on your calendar. I just wanted to give another shout out. We did do a mail out and some other things, but every time we can mention it, I think it's a good thing to let people know. Number 10, there's no business arising in unfinished business. Number 11, new business. So 11.1, information report, council strategic planning. So we have that in our package, and I'll open it to the floor now. I think we have our consultant online with us. So we ready to go? Okay.
Good evening, folks. Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks to Council for giving me this time. My name is Craig Pollitt. I work with Strategic Steps. I'm the Vice President Atlantic with that company. I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully I'm going to do it properly. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And can you see the presentation, or can you see all my slides and my tools for going through the presentation?
We see a whole bunch of slides on the bottom. This opening, yeah, there we go. Now we see.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
All right. The technology. Thanks very much for your time. Just before I get into a summary of the session we had and report, just to introduce us, Strategic Steps is a governance-based consulting company. It started in Alberta by the gentleman on the top of the screen there, Ian McCormick. Ian's an author. He's written several books on governance and the importance of good governance, especially in local government. Most of our work is in local government, as a matter of fact. We do work with any organizations that have a governance component, governance and staff component. We kind of work in the world between the board and the council, and then the administration and the folks who deliver the work. Ian has a new book coming out very soon, actually, called Uncivil Society, all about incivility in the municipal sector. We have 3 employees in Alberta. We have 3 employees in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's where I'm stationed. We do strategic planning, some of which we touched on in your session. We do organizational reviews. We do code of conduct reviews, bylaw analysis, bylaw writing, that sort of thing. But primarily we do work around governance. So either training for councils on governance and for staff, or orientations and that sort of thing. That's our bread and butter. All the other things we do, strategic planning, organizational reviews, etc., always have a governance element. Good governance is sort of our core competency. What I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes, I won't take too long. I'm going to talk about the process we went through back at the beginning of February, the vision and mission ideas that we came up with, the values we came up with, and then I'm going to quickly highlight all of the objectives that were identified in that meeting, along with some of the intermediate steps and the metrics that we came up with for how we know we're getting those things done. The workshop itself had multiple components. We did a survey of council in advance. We spent a bit of time at the session, as we always do, I just mentioned, talking about governance and the role of a council, the role of individual councillors in the governance process, the relationship between council and staff. It's really, really important in any of these pieces of work to understand the balance of those two pieces, that council decides what, administration and the management decide and deliver how. We did a bit of a SWOT analysis. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we looked at the world outside of council, outside the municipal organization, what sort of opportunities might be there, what sort of threats might be there, and then we looked internal to the organization. So what are the strengths of the organization? What might be some of the weaknesses that we want to try to strengthen? Out of that, we worked a little bit on vision and mission. We didn't come up with full-on vision statements and mission statements. The main reason for that is that the whole purpose of this workshop was really to pull council together. It's a new council. We always say, even if in an election only one councillor changes, that's a new council. So we thought it was important to spend that day and a half, 2 days, really bringing folks together around those key ideas. And as you'll see in a moment, then using that information to do a larger strategic planning process later. We also looked at values, values being sort of how you decide on a day-to-day basis whether you're going to do something or not do something. And we came up with some objectives that council felt it was important to get accomplished over the next 6 to 9 months. Before we get into a longer-term strategic plan, there was some time-bound things that council wanted to address, and we needed to come up with some objectives around those. So vision and mission elements that we came up with, there was a long discussion and a bit of an exercise around how we came up with this, but we came up with 3 core elements. The idea of belonging, that people should feel like they belong to Lunenburg, that Lunenburg belongs to them, that everybody belongs. It's an all-encompassing thing, that in the future, people feel a shared sense of belonging in the community, that there's intentionality in what the municipality does, that whatever the municipality does in terms of a strategic plan or its operational work that it does, that there's always a reason, and that reason is tied back to the vision. And thirdly was this idea of vibrancy, that we want to see a Lunenburg in the future that is not stagnant, that is not slowing down, but in fact is finding new paths and finding new ways to be vibrant, whether that be through the arts or economic growth or population growth. We want vibrancy and something in terms of moving forward. The vision would end up being a statement of what Lunenburg is going to be like in the future. You know, Lunenburg would typically be how one of those statements starts. The mission is more about how the municipality plays a role in that, because there's more organizations than the municipality is going to make sure that Lunenburg as a place is a successful, happy place and healthy place. So the municipality has to narrow down what its role in that is, the municipal organization. Next are the value statements, and in the same way as vision and mission, because of how we were doing this workshop, it was more about sort of bringing people together on shared ideas. We didn't come up with full-on value statements. These could be a paragraph each. But what they do is provide a lens to council. So when council has a decision to make, a significant budget decision or a significant policy decision, the values need to be seen, to be checked with and considered in making that decision. So they're really, really important. And the four suggested ones that we came up with were compassion, so understanding where people are coming from, how they are living their lives, how this decision will impact them. Integrity, the idea that you mean what you say and you say what you mean, and that you can show evidence to that fact. Authenticity, that the decisions you're making feel authentic to the place that Lunenburg is. Because the integrity piece covers off sort of your own institutional honesty and transparency. Authenticity is much more about, does this feel like a Lunenburg decision? And to make sure that it makes sense in your context. And lastly is the idea of perseverance, which is, we're not in this for short-term wins. Lunenburg needs to have, as I mentioned before, a vibrant, welcoming economy and community well into the future. One of the ways you do that is to always ask the question, if we do this, is it contributing to our long-term growth and our perseverance? Will we keep moving forward based on this decision? Or is it a short-term focused decision? So we came up with several objectives. The first one is a full review of the Lunenburg electrical utility operations. The indicator of success would be that the utility is providing reliable, affordable electricity. That objective is already in process, as I understand it. So things are moving on that file. Objective 2, and these are the objectives that we came up with, I should say, in response to the idea that before we get to a proper long-term strategic plan, or a 4 or 5 year strategic plan, we needed to address some issues that were facing this council right now that needed to be dealt with. Objective 2, creating a supportive, positive work environment within the town of Lunenburg. There were positions vacant that council felt it was really necessary to deal with before a broader planning process starts. The intermediate step will be to fill those critical positions, including putting in place a permanent CAO. Extremely important role in terms of doing any kind of strategic planning. Very difficult to do if you don't have what they call a permanent head working for the organization. And then intermediate step number 2, once those gaps are filled, build staff talent to respond to requests and analyses. I understand that's also in progress, but that comes back to the idea of responding to requests from residents, responding to requests from council, that the administration has the people and the talents, the skill sets in place to make sure that these questions get answered and that projects start moving forward. And that people need professional development. It's an ongoing part of any successful organization. The indicators in this case, 1, the key positions are filled. Number 2, staff morale is measurably improved. To be honest, the most important word there is measurably. There needs to be a focused effort to check in with staff in any organization. This is not a Lunenburg issue. This is an organizational writ large issue. You can't know how your staff are feeling unless you ask them, and you need to ask them the right way. And to the third point, asking those questions need to be part of a broader organizational development plan. Staff really need to know that not only are you concerned about how they do their work and are they happy doing their work, do they feel like they're being successful, but that there is a plan to keep that experience moving forward. So that's how we'll know when we're getting some success. Objective 3, rebuilding trust with the community. It was commented by council that this is in progress. I think this is something that this particular council has been focusing on since they got elected. We sort of captured it in this moment, in this particular document. But this is also a longer term goal. Nobody's under the illusion that building trust and faith within a community is a quick fix. It takes quite a long time. You have to listen, you have to respond, you have to prove that you're going to do both. So it does take some time. We had 2 intermediate steps that we recommended there. One sort of internal, one external. The first one being a regular review of bylaws, policies, and governance procedures. It's best practice, good practice, wise practice, we would say in our company, to do these regular reviews of your bylaws, your policies, and any of your governance protocols or procedures, so that you are constantly aware of what those procedures are, staff are aware, and you can share the results of that with the public. The public needs to see and know that you are taking a look at not just the decisions you're making, but how you govern. The process of governing is important. Intermediate step 2, which is more external, is that the municipality, including council, in their elected roles, actively engages with community organizations and residents. That council is more available, that the council as an entity is more permeable to community organizations, so that they can ask questions, have conversations with you, understand where your heads are on certain things, and that this is part of your job, is part of getting out there and integrating with the community to talk about these things. Indicators, the first indicator is that good governance protocols are put in place and are followed. Ian is quite fond of saying, first you've got to have the policies, then you've got to follow the policies, then you've got to enforce the policies. And if any one of the 3 links in that chain breaks, your policies aren't really doing what they're supposed to be doing. So have the protocols in place, follow them, demonstrate that you're following them, and report on that. And that support and trust from residents and community organizations is measurably improved. And there again is that word measurably. This is not a gut feel thing. It is for individual counselors, but as an organization, you need to be formally engaging to find out how people feel about your performance on this. And it's an important part of an engagement strategy that you might want to put in place. Objective number 4, that planning for the daycare project is given the necessary focus. Council felt that's been accomplished, that a formal plan for addressing the daycare needs is adopted by council. That was a very straightforward piece that we knew could be accomplished quickly, but it was an important piece that people felt needed to be mentioned there. Finally, objective number 5, improved municipal communications effectiveness. Council felt this was also in progress. I think even in this session, I can say that everybody in that room recognized that maybe communications wasn't where it needed to be for a whole host of reasons, and that's not uncommon in municipalities. In fact, it's more common than uncommon. The immediate step number 1, that a comms plan, and to a previous comment, that would include social media policies and protocols, be developed, providing guidance on communications goals and mechanisms. Those mechanisms include social media, but they include a lot more than just social media. But council as a body and the municipality as an organization need a plan that they can follow. Intermediate step number 2, that communications protocol to guide council and administration is adopted by council. So part of that plan would be coming up with a protocol that when a call comes in or when a request is made or when you need to decide, are we going to speak on this issue, that there's a protocol in place and that you follow that protocol. The protocol, they get a bad rap because I think people think protocols are there to limit communications. They're actually there to make communications decisions more quickly, more easily, and to get more information out. The thing that normally holds back communications is uncertainty about how to say it, how to put it out there, etc. So if you've got a protocol in place, most of that thinking is done for you before you have to answer. The indicator would be, again, measurable increase in resident and stakeholder satisfaction with municipal communications. Again, this comes back to some sort of engagement strategy, engagement approach, where council is understanding whether the things you're doing, new communications approaches you're taking, are actually being noticed by residents and appreciated by residents. If they are, that's great. If they aren't, it gives you valuable information in terms of how you might want to shift your path or shift gears on that particular thing. So that's the 5 objectives, the intermediate steps, and the indicators that we came up with. It was, as I mentioned, an opportunity to sort of help solidify council on a direction that they want to go in for the next little while, the nature of the kind of council they want to be in terms of values. What it wasn't was a strategic plan. It was a really good opportunity for this council to have a conversation they needed to have before a strategic plan. A strategic plan really needs to have significant public engagement. There needs to be more research done in terms of what can be accomplished and what can't be accomplished. Staff need to be engaged in that process as well. It's a much bigger piece. Lunenburg is very lucky in that you already have several significant planning documents that can be used, some of them reaching out 30, 40 years. These are plans for the community and they're vitally important. The municipality as a corporate entity, as the governing entity, also needs its own organizational strategic plan, and that's what we're talking about here. So that's why our recommendation is that this fall council undertake a robust strategic planning process and have that plan published in plain language, not an overly technical document, at a public meeting in the fall, so that residents can read it very quickly and understand very quickly where council wants to go over the next 4 years or whatever the time frame is. That's the end of my presentation. You have the report, the full report, and I've had it for a while. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Craig. I'll open the floor to my council right now. Anybody like to start? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you very much through the chair. Hello, Craig. Nice to see you again
You too.
virtually. And I want to compliment you and your team on a very worthwhile couple of days that we spent with you earlier this winter. I think it was very valuable time for our council. But I do have a question. I'd noticed upon seeing the draft document earlier that there didn't seem to be mention of what I thought was indicated as a priority of our group, which was the review of our MPS and LUB. In my notes from that weekend, it was noted as an issue that I'd raised and thought was one that was shared by my colleagues as well. And I just wonder if you recall that, if there was a reason that was not included in the document.
No more than except to say that I thought it was a process. So my apologies if you expected to see it there and it wasn't there. My understanding was that was something that was happening anyway, so we didn't need to put it in as a sort of an identified objective because it was part of an ongoing process and was going to happen anyway. But if I misunderstood that, I apologize.
No, just to follow up, I guess that's a fair comment. I mean, it is written right in the documents that they are to be reviewed, you know, on a regular basis. And I guess I would like to, and can talk about this in because I hope we'll look at, you know, adopting this document in some sort of official capacity. But I would look to have that prioritized, I guess, so that it doesn't just fall into the, you know, we may get to it at some point, or it may, you know, get pushed down the road a little further if it's not specifically identified. So I just mentioned that, but thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Strong?
Good evening, and it's nice to see you when we're not having a blizzard and we're under crisis management in the town of Lunenburg. But I wanted to thank you because I thought you touched on what I needed to tie the things together from the meeting. And I'm wondering, Rachel, whether that might be just tied into the rebuilding trust within the community, a regular review of bylaws, policies, and governance, because we're overdue for a review of the Land Use Planning Act or whatever it is. I'm sorry, I'm not clear tonight. And we were also under the stress of making a decision or trying to find some kind of a solution for the daycare and dealing with the electrical grid that we're still continuing to deal with, but that we've made some progress on. So I think this, what you've just done is explained to me what it was that I could take away from that meeting or that weekend in a more manageable way. And I'm looking forward to the second part of it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Daphne?
I just wanted to thank you, Craig, and my colleagues. If you remember that weekend, I was pretty sick. But I do want to thank my colleagues for the open discussions that we had, and to you, Craig, for putting everything in perspective. And I think we knew going into this that we weren't quite ready to do a strategic report. We all knew that we were facing some very critical action things, and we were missing some very key pieces of the players in the game. So I just want to assure the town that we are looking out for your best interests, and that's why we didn't come back with a strategic plan, and just keep the faith in us, and we'll get there at the end. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Greek?
No questions for you today, Craig, but again, just wanted to thank you and Tyler for a great weekend back in February. It was really great to bring everyone around the table, and, you know, I think it brought us closer as a team and really provided us a great platform to be able to converse and be able to discuss the priorities of the town to be able to continue to work for the benefit of the residents. So again, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Anybody else? Councillor Fullerton.
What Alex said.
Anybody else?
Well, everybody else said it too. I found the weekend very valuable because we hadn't at that point really had a chance to come together in that way and talk about our priorities. And it became very clear to me over the weekend that we are on the same page on a lot of those things, which I found really heartening. So, and also I just thought you guys did a great job. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just like to add, as someone that got elected in 2000 as a 31-year-old new Green councillor around a table of a bunch at that time, much older people than me and very inexperienced. I think this weekend was very beneficial to all of us. I think we truly came out as a team. I think we, both officially and unofficially sitting around afterwards, got to discuss things to see that we really all did run for the same reasons, for the betterment of the community and to make Lunenburg a better place to live and basically to visit. So again, thank you, Craig. You did a great job. You explained things in a way that we could always understand it. I love the fact that you said a strategic plan should be, to the point, short that people understand it, and not something that's going to overwhelm people. So a little bit different than the current CCP we have, which when you first look at that document, most people would just put it aside because it's 400 pages, I think. So again, you made it very clear. It's supposed to be a little more, a little easier to understand and to read. So again, thank you very much. And thank you to my colleagues. Again, I think we had a great weekend. It was a ice storm. It wasn't great weather, but we all made it there. We had a great 2 days. A few of us were dying sick, but we still went and participated in all the events. And again, in your next steps, the second last paragraph where you recommend that there's money put in the budget for a more robust strategic plan. I'm pleased to be made aware by our CAO that there is money in this year's budget for that in the fall. So I look forward to this fall. That is if it passes the budget process, which is starting next Tuesday, but it is in there right now. So again, I look forward to later on in the fall getting to step 2 of the process. So on behalf of myself and my colleagues and on behalf of the citizens, because I think it made us a much better team, to be quite honest. So thank you, Craig. Job well done.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of your proceedings.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
So while we're fresh on this, rather than looking down the road to make a notice of motion, I'm wondering if I can make a notice of motion now with respect to the report that we've received tonight. I put forth a notice of motion that we replace the stated objective number 4 in the document provided for us, noting the daycare issue, which, as it's noted, we addressed it the immediate concern of the daycare at that time, and replace objective 4 with the objective of a review of our MPS and LUB as a priority item. And with that change to the document, adopt these goals as our official priorities until such time as we're able to adopt a more formal strategic plan as is recommended in the report.
That's just a notice of motion that will move forward to an upcoming council meeting. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to 11.2. What the heck was that? Okay. Noise bylaw, first reading. So who's going to present that tonight? Is anybody? Okay. Okay.
So apologies. Thank you for that. So this draft bylaw was first discussed at the April 1st Committee of the Whole meeting. And at that time, council had indicated interest in a couple of changes, such as the removal of the phrase closed windows or windows closed, an acknowledgement of additional communication methods for public notices, and then some clarification possibly around marine and industrial noises. So those changes have been implemented and highlighted in yellow in the draft that's included in your agenda package. So I'll just quickly go over this, and Shania is also here. We worked on these changes together, so if there's any questions, we're here for them, obviously. So in response to council's direction, we did remove the phrase "with windows closed" from the definition of disruptive noise. The definition now focuses on whether the noise interferes with normal indoor conversation without relying on building conditions. So to support this, we've added reasonable personal standard in the definition section. This means that enforcement decisions are based on what an average person of ordinary tolerance would find disruptive under similar circumstances. We hope this creates a fair, flexible, and legally recognized standard. We've also added that section 7D, the industrial and marine noise. So we've added this to clarify how industrial and marine operations are treated. Businesses operating in appropriately zoned areas are allowed to generate reasonable noise between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. as long as it's not excessively loud or disruptive under the bylaw. So prolonged and continuous mechanical noises like from generators can still be a violation if it causes vibrations, interference with normal indoor conversation, or otherwise unreasonable as defined in the bylaw. And I think that was kind of it. We did add a little catch-all clause at the end there. We had received an email from a resident who had mentioned our LUB and MPS and how those interact with each other. So the intent anytime we create a new bylaw or policy is never to contravene or contradict any of our other documents. They're supposed to work in concert with each other. So just a bit of a catch-all clause to say if something is in the noise bylaw, we wouldn't be trumping that essentially through the LUB and MPS. If you have any specific questions, Shania and I are both here to answer them.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Councillor Daphne.
So staff through the chair, staff recommends we follow Bridgewater and not have decibel readings as they're harder to prove, but yet other municipalities are using decibel readings. So how do we quantify noise levels for enforcement levels?
Yeah, so we do understand that there may be some decibel interest in decibel thresholds, and they can offer objective standards. We chose them not to include them in this draft for several reasons. So accurate decibel enforcement requires, from our understanding, specialized equipment, regular calibration, and specific conditions like controlling the weather and background noise. So in theory, the decibel and having a set number makes sense. Sometimes in practice that comes with other challenges. So that's what we have found in talking to some other municipalities. It seems to be a little bit of a mixed bag of those who choose to use the decibels. And from what we've seen, sometimes it is harder to enforce and doesn't necessarily stand up in court when you use a decibel metering. That being said, I think where some of the challenges come with the decibel, it might be that they often paint everything with the same broad stroke. So, you know, there's been challenges where a low hum from, say, an industrial noise is still a disturbance under perhaps what our bylaw is saying it might be, but it wouldn't necessarily hit that number on the decibel meter. So there are other options, like perhaps like a hybrid approach where we're not necessarily using that one metric for everything under the noise bylaw, but maybe for like industrial use, like generators or fans, maybe that would make sense. Again, so other municipalities do use decibels. It seems to be a choice of whether it's actually enforceable or whether it stands up in court. So we opted to use the measures in the noise bylaw that we say, like, you know, vibrating of the house, or if it's interfering with normal conversation. So if someone's having a big party right beside you and you now have to raise your voice to have normal conversation in your own home, we would consider that a disturbance. Or shouting profanities and things that are seen as disturbing in that way, screaming, yelling, hollering. So we've or the 100 feet rule as well. So if the noise is audible 100 feet from the problem property, we've chosen to look at that as a way to define it rather than the vagueness of what it currently is as just enjoyment of the property. So really, it's a decision to make. If you wanted to look at decibels, it's definitely an option we could explore as well.
I find the decimal meter one more it takes any kind of reasoning or common sense out of the equation. So if the decimal reading is say point whatever, and you exceed that, then you've broken the bylaw. So for example, in our bylaw, it says here, if the noise continues persistently at a high volume without reasonable breaks during the permitted hours, for example, amplified music for 3 hours. Well, I think I remember reading that when one of our neighboring communities brought in the decimal meter, somebody got in trouble for practicing a musical instrument outside for their school band. Like they played in, I guess, in the high school band. They brought their instrument home and they were practicing, and one of the neighbors called. They measured the decimal meter and it was over the decimal meter, so they had to stop, and it ended up getting into the paper. And again, without common sense should have prevailed there. I mean, when I was in the high school band, you didn't have to worry about me breaking the decimal meter because I didn't practice. But my sister played the flute and she would have broken the decimal meter many a times, but she never practiced for 3 hours straight either. So that would have fit within the bylaw. If she was out for a half hour and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, our bylaw officer could use common sense and say, okay, you know, do it for and tell the neighbor. So again, I find the decimal meter makes it more sort of more black and white, but then you can't use common sense and can't use what it's really there for. It's not there to prevent people from living, really, I'd say. So I like not having the decimal meter in, but that's my personal opinion. Anybody else have anything on this? Councillor Strong.
I don't like the decimal meter because in the courtroom, it can be thrown out so easily if it's not been tested recently, or, you know, it's not really the best evidence of anything. It really does come down to the individuals involved. So I really appreciate that this is giving people power instead of a machine or an auditory device or something like that. I do have an issue with the reasonable person standard. I don't think that the way it is set out here is in plain language enough to understand. I also am wondering if it is blanket, doesn't actually, you know, consider zoning specific issues. Could I be complaining if I hear a jackhammer going? That's a jackhammer that's been going for the last 5 years in my neighborhood, right? Like because I'm in an industrial zone or something like that. I guess a jackhammer is not the best example, but you know, some kind of activity that has been going on for 5 years. If I move in, do I get to complain because it, you know, anyway. But the reasonable person test, as I understand it, is really just whether that person is reasonable who's making the complaint. And so I'm just wondering if the language of that could be made more clear, more plain. And is the reasonable person the bylaw officer, or is it me? Maybe that can be defined.
Anybody else? The one thing I also like is adding other communication channels. So what I'd like to highlight is, you know, we've talked about this new communication plan that we're going to come out with, you know, sooner rather than later. I really think when there's community events going on, i.e. fireworks that get approved from us, or whatever, an outdoor venue event, say at the museum, that gets approved. I think that we have to do a better job of just social media. So once again, I think we've already sent out one newsletter. I hope that in the upcoming months, we can do more of a regular newsletter. And the other thing is, if we put on that newsletter that you can respond and, you know, sign up for direct email things, I would like to see us maybe weekly or every second week send out a direct email to all residents that want it on a Friday afternoon around 3 or whatever, to highlight what's going on in the, you know, for the next week or so, whatever. However, if we do it every week, then we have to do it for the next week, upcoming week. So again, I do like that's in there because I think we relied for the last number of years too much on social media. I think we've learned going door to door that was a mistake. So I'd like to see us open up our community even more than we are. We're trying, and I'm hoping that it keeps getting better and better. So is there anything else anybody has that they'd like changed in there or update it before we move the first reading? Councillor Daphne.
Through the chair, it's not really a question, just a comment. I think we're very liberal with our hours, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I just ask the rest of the, after that, you know, you respect your neighbor next door. Just because it's after 11 p.m. or up until 11 p.m. Doesn't mean you have to go crazy every night, Monday to Sunday. So just respect your neighbors, guys.
Anything else? Okay, so do we want to bring this back for first reading? Do we want to pass the first reading now with the changes, with some changes? There has been some, what's the best way to go with this, Kayla?
So my understanding, I'll just recap for council, the only direction I feel like I got there was maybe making that reasonable person standard a little bit more plain language and clarifying the intent of who that's supposed to mean. If that is all that council would like to see changed at this point, you could still give first reading by all means, and when we bring that back for second reading, that'll be there, and we'll have the public hearing ahead of that. So if there's anything by the time it reaches second reading that causes council to pause or they want to see changed, by all means, you still have another opportunity to make edits as well. So giving it first reading tonight is recommended if everyone feels comfortable moving that forward. Still opportunity to change things if it gets forward to second reading and it doesn't jive with you guys anymore.
Okay, so recommendation then would be that council approves first reading of the noise bylaw with the changes presented here tonight. Moved by Councillor Fullerton. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Strong. Any further discussion on the motion? Deputy Mayor.
Just a question for clarification, to remind me, I guess, of the process. It is the public hearing second reading, or is there a public hearing and then a second reading?
Yeah, so typically we line up our public hearing and our second reading all at the same night. However, if council did want to hold the public hearing, say at one meeting and then push out the approval and second reading, that's definitely an option to consider. Just our standard practice is to hold it all in the same night.
We can always see too by the, by the response. If it's a full house, we can push it off and hear everybody's concerns. If not, we can proceed. So, okay, so there's a mover and a seconder. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. 11.3, tender award Deers Lake Dam and Spillway upgrades. Tyson?
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, I have the Deers Lake Dam and Spillway upgrades tender award report to present. The recommendations in the report, first one is that council increase the budget for the Deers Lake Dam and Spillway upgrades project to $1,319,000, funded by $85,000 from grants, $446,000 from depreciation funds, and $788,000 from capital debt. Second recommendation is that council award the Deers Lake Dam and Spillway upgrades tender to Dexter Construction for the amount of $1,010,000 plus $880 plus the tax. So we've talked about this project several times recently. The most recent one was on February 25th, where council provided pre-approval at the council meeting for a budget of $1,031,000, including the net HST for the execution of the project. Since then, we've held the tender for the construction work for this project that closed on March 28th, 2025, and has a validity for 90 days. So we're around a month into that 3-month period. We received 2 tenders that are summarized in the table. So relatively close considering the scope of the budget, but both over $1 million. So the dam and the spillway work together to control the water level and sometimes release the water in Deers Lake, and also protect the water utilities raw water pump house, which feeds water from the lake to the water treatment plant on Northwest Road. So this project is long overdue. We have a pre-design report from back in 2019 recommending this work be performed immediately. So 2019 to 2025 feels like there's some urgency at this time. So in terms of the budget itself, as I said, we had the pre-approved amount earlier this year of $1 million, $1,031,000, including the net HST, excuse me. So now incorporating the results of the civil tendering work, the revised budget for the project is detailed in the table. Basically, it's an increase of $288,000 from what council approved in February. So not the news that I wanted to bring back to council, but it's the reality of the situation. So there's a breakdown of the funding on the third page. So the breakdown between the grant that's already been secured, the PCAP grant, when the scope of this project was much, much smaller. And then we have the depreciation funds, and then a large portion of the project is debt. So it'll come up in the agenda as well, but staff are also planning to submit an application for funding under the FRIIP program to help offset at least a portion of this cost. Also included in the report is the consultant's letter of recommendation. So that concludes the report. If there are any questions, I can address them.
Thank you, Tyson. I just want to have a comment. I think when I was first sitting at this chair, this project was budgeted at around $300,000 or $400,000. So but it was a much smaller project. So we got $85,000 of provincial funding, which was great at the time because it was a decent portion of the project. So hopefully when we apply through the FRIIP program, that they see the actual increase, because I think the project is about $1 million more than what we initially thought, mainly because of some of the new regulations that have come into effect in the meantime as well, with the EO passage thing that we got to install. So let's hope that the FRIIP program sees the value of what we're doing, because again, I think even last year you had a number that was much lower than this, but at that time we were looking for more funding and it was deferred. So I think now is the time we need to get this done, because obviously if you haven't learned anything except the fact that every time you defer something right now, since probably 2018 or 19, every time you defer something moving forward, it's going to cost you substantially more the following year, it seems. So again, I want to thank you for your detailed report. And I personally don't see any other option but to move the two recommendations, but I can't do that. So I'll just leave it to my colleagues around the table. Deputy Mayor?
I just moved the first recommendation that council increase the budget for the Dares Lake Dam and Spillway upgrades project to $1,319,000, funded by $85,000 from grants, $446,000 from depreciation funds, and $788,000 from capital debt.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Fullerton. Any further discussion or question on the recommendation? Councillor Fullerton.
Through the chair, Tyson, I have a question about capacity, system capacity with this upgrade. It's going to serve the community well into the future with all of this, with these upgrades. I know that that's not part of what's being done, but how do you feel about what the system's capacity would be, and are we comfortable with that?
So through the chair, I think there's a couple of different aspects to this. So the first one would be sort of the structural integrity of the dam itself and the spillway. So the existing spillway has been in position for 55 years and deteriorated. And so that'll be replaced with these precast concrete box structures. So very substantial precast concrete place to allow the spillway. And then the dam itself is getting raised a little bit over 2 feet, and the sloping on it will be less steep, so provide extra structural integrity. So these are all upgrades to the system. The raising of the height will potentially allow extra capacity in the dam itself. We'll have the stop logs that help to control the flow as well. That'll that are part of the existing setup with the spillway, but it'll also be incorporated in this design. So to me, the main aspect is the structural integrity. The pump house is directly downstream from this structure that pumps the water from Dares Lake up the hill up to the plan to Northwest Road. So there's that aspect, and then just maintaining the quality existing water source that we have at Dares Lake is it's one of those core assets that we really have to protect.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you. And I have one more. I agree. Thank you. You talked about another grant program. What's the timeline on that, and how does that fit in with the work being done?
So through the chair, that grant program, we need to make our submission April 28th, which is Monday. So staff have kind of been preparing those two submissions on the side that I'll get to in a future report. So I'm not quite sure what the timeline for award is, but we can present all the costs that again, that are incurred between April 1, 2025 and March 31, 2026. So that would be all this construction scope plus our construction inspection that the consultants are offering, plus the design report that we have to provide DFO at the end. So we have incurred some costs to date in the design that wouldn't be eligible under that, but there may be a way to recover that within the PCAP funding that we already have. So the limit on that is up to 50%. It doesn't mean we necessarily get 50%, but that would be the upper limit. But anything that we're getting would help us offset that amount of debt that we're taking on under the existing funding schedule we've outlined.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, the motion is before us. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried 7-0. So recommendation number 2, anyone prepared to move that? Councillor Babineau.
So I move that council award the Dares Lake Dam and Spillway upgrades tender to Dexter Construction Company Limited for the amount of $1,010,880 plus HST.
Moved or seconder? Second by Councillor Fullerton. Any further question on that motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. We'll move on to 11.4, tender award wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So the wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion tender award. The first recommendation is that council increase the budget for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion project to $12,075,000, funded through a combination of grants and capital borrowing. The second recommendation is that council award the wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion tender to Avondale Construction Limited for the amount of $9,154,762 plus HST. So some background on this project. So we're all aware of the wastewater upgrade and expansion project. The key components of the project are the construction of the new concrete standard batch reactor tanks, the modification of the existing bioreactor to serve as an aerobic sludge digester, replacement of the fine screen washer compactor blowers and UV disinfection system, removal of the DAF units and auxiliary equipment, expansion of the sludge dewatering by installing a third rotary press channel, and the installation of the backup generator at the site. So within the 24-25 town capital budget, this project had an allowance of $9,982,000, and this was under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan with the federal, provincial and town components. And council will remember we also made an application based on the revised order of magnitude costs to the grid program in December of 2024. So the tender for this project closed on March 20th, 2025 and has a validity period of 60 days. So again, we're about halfway through that period right now. The tender results are summarized in the table. So we had one bidder at the 9 million mark that we've talked about, and then the other three bidders were all sort of between 13 and 14 million dollars. So encouraging that we got four bidders for such a big contract where we want the competition and competent bidders. So within those amounts, the bidders were required to carry fixed allowances within the tender for the pre-selected items. So that's the headworks, the SBR tank equipment, and the UV disinfection equipment, electrical maintenance, and key pipe data hydrovac survey work. So about $1.6 million of any of those numbers is those compulsory items they had to carry. Although the lowest bidder had the longest proposed schedule, there are no concerns with that period relative to the other ones. So all the periods there were sort of in the year ballpark, or some of them were a little bit more, but all reasonable for this scope of work. So as part of the tender review process conducted by the consultant, town staff participated in a meeting with the low bidder in which they responded to questions on items like previous similar experience, their proposed staff and subcontractors, foreseen challenges with the scope, their methodology for the more complex portions. All the answers they provided satisfied ourselves and the consultant. So this was a way of sort of mitigating the risk. It's great when you see an item that's 9 million compared to the 13, but we felt it was important that we do our due diligence and not just bite at that and get into something that unforeseen and something that would hurt the town going ahead. So we have a letter of recommendation from our consultant as well, recommending that the tender be awarded to Avondale. So moving on to the financial components, as we talked about, we already have that $9,982,000 that has been carried in previous budgets. Based on the construction tender, we have a revised budget amount at the top of the third page of the report. So that's the $12,075,000. So within that amount, it's important to recognise that we're carrying a contingency there of $2 million, and that's in line with what would be recommended for a project this size. It also gives us a little bit of coverage in case, just with taking this lower bid, gives us, if we get into some items there that we need to negotiate, but even with the 9 and a 2 contingency, that still keeps us around the 11 mark, which is quite a bit of breathing space still to the 13 million of the other tenderers. So that's important to recognise. So the town's component of the original 9,982,000 is the $2,695,000 to be financed by debt, increasing the project budget by the $2,093,000 would increase this debt amount to $4,788,000 for the town. Sorry, large numbers here for me to pronounce. So as we outlined in the December 10 report that we presented for the grid application, there have been reserves allocated for this project since 22-23. And they're projected to be 1,144,000 at March 31, 2026. And these reserves will be used to mitigate the amount of debt the town will need to secure for this project. So there's a summary of the contribution within the report, and it assumes some support from the grid funding, which still needs confirmation. But you can see that the anticipated revised borrowing for the town is still in the same ballpark as we presumed, so it's slightly below. So council will note, even with an increased budget for the plant upgrade, that the borrowing for the town is slightly lower. So that's a positive from what we're seeing, and also really positive that we talked about that projected budget of over $16 million when we were talking about this in December. So pleased that we're not just under that number. We're kind of well under that number with what we're seeing here. That concludes the report. If any questions, I'll answer them.
Tyson, I'd just like to take a second and thank staff for applying for funding opportunities and working the budget, and the fact that we got multiple bidders was great. We got the bid out early and got multiple bidders because, again, if you remember back in December when this was presented and it was over 16 million, all you had to do was go on social media the next day and the sky was falling, and it was 16 million. We're now over $4 million less than that projected funds. Plus, we're hoping to secure more funding through the efforts of staff, funding applications and stuff. So again, it's not as desolate as it sounded. It's still $12 million. It's a large number. I don't know how to write it out. So, I mean, but it's something that has to be done. We have to move forward. And again, the fact that it's actually $4 million less than we thought it would be only 5 months ago or 4 months ago is phenomenal. And the fact that staff has been applying aggressively for more funding and in hopes to get it. Again, the fact that when this project was first announced, the town always expected to fund up to 2.7 million. Now the project is costing more than we had originally thought, and we're out of 2.6 million. So we're actually spending less of our own funds than we thought originally. So again, this is just a note to staff. Thank you very much. Job well done, getting this put together in this format. So again, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor?
I just as well want to say that the consultant earlier who was talking about our strategic priorities mentioned perseverance. And I think the fact that both of these projects were of note and required during my last term in office and seeing all the work that was required and has now been, the upfront work has been done. I think that's wonderful. And they are, the Dares Lake project and the wastewater project, both are just absolutely critical pieces of infrastructure. So to see them actually coming to fruition or, getting to that point is wonderful to see. So having said that, I'm very happy to move the first recommendation that council increase the budget for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion project to $12,075,000 funded through a combination of grants and capital borrowing.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Strong. Any further discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Now we'll move on to recommendation 2. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Councillor Babineau.
I move that council award the wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion tender to Avondale Construction Limited for the amount of $9,154,762 plus HST.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Fullerton. Any further discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much again for this. So we'll move on to 11.5, PCAP and FRIIP grant application requests. So Tyson, you're up again. And you're a Leafs fan, so read this quickly.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the PCAP and FRIIP grant application requests, the recommendations are that council approve an application for the Provincial Capital Assistance Program for the Pelham Street Reconstruction Project. And the second recommendation is that council approve an application for the Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program for the Des Lake Dam and Spillway Upgrades Project. So quick background, Provincial Capital Assistance Program, or PCAP, is available to help municipalities invest in high priority infrastructure projects. Program may fund up to 50% of eligible project costs. Typically, this is related to water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid management costs. And we talked about that period that costs are eligible. So basically the 25-26 fiscal year. So the Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program is available to help municipalities invest in infrastructure and studies which reduce flood risks and community vulnerability. Again, we're looking at 50% of eligible costs, different types of projects. We've had it confirmed that the Spillway and Dam upgrade is suitable through informal discussions. So both these applications are due on Monday, as I said, so April 28th. So in terms of the PCAP work, staff are recommending applying for the Pelham Street Reconstruction Project. So that was one that was presented to council in the previous budget cycle. The scope expanded. So the scope includes the replacement of an old clay sewer main on Pelham Street between King and Prince Street. It includes storm separation that isn't currently part of the infrastructure there. So introducing a storm line, new catch basins at Prince Street, and that would be building on the infrastructure that went on for the Not Ruland upgrades that were performed last fall. So those aspects and the road reinstatement components that are impacted by those items are also included. So the report talks about $220,000 of eligible costs. I think that can increase based on the discussions we had. The PCAP budget, in terms of the provincial budget, isn't a massive budget though. So 50%, it seems unlikely that we would get it, but I mean, any contribution we can get, it would be greatly appreciated. So that's what we're looking at with the PCAP. In terms of the FRIIP, or the Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program, we've kind of covered a lot of this in the previous report that I submitted. So we've got that pre-approved value now of the 1 million. Well, sorry, the newly approved value of 1,319,000. So that one, again, it's in our interest to try and reduce that debt that we've talked about in the previous report and try and mitigate those impacts. So there's a summary of the cost breakdown that will come to council next Tuesday evening in the budget deliberations. It would be the wastewater utility items that we're talking about. But as I say, I think potentially 90% of the amount above as well, we could look to incorporate in our application, where the sewer main comes most of the way back to King Street, where that starts. So that's how we'd be looking at presenting this funding request. So it's up to 50%. I'm on it based on the discussions I've had. wouldn't be optimistic on getting that 50%, but if they've got their mindset on a certain percentage, then the bigger the number, the more we would get, right? So I'm choosing to look at it that way with no real basis, but we'll be positive. And then, yeah, back to the Des Lake Dam and Spillway. So that increased budget, again, just looking for some assistance there to offset that additional cost that your worship talked about in the previous report. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to try answer them.
Thank you, Tyson. Any questions? Deputy Mayor?
My just question again for clarification on process. Happy to move the recommendations, but is it required by the funders that a motion be made to, yeah, okay, to get a motion of council to approve the application go forward?
Through the chair, yes. One of the questions in the application is, has council moved a motion to support this application? So there is the option to say no on the application, but I don't think it would be looked upon favorably in the review.
It just, I mean, we've approved the project. It just seems, a little redundant in my mind that you would need our approval, but that's, I understand that that's a requirement. And so I'm happy to move the recommendation that council approve an application to the Provincial CAP Assistance Program, PCAP, for the Pelham Street construction project, and that council approve. Should we do them separately?
If there's general consensus to move forward with both applications, you could lump them all into one recommendation. However, if council felt they wanted to support one and not the other, I would recommend keeping them separate.
Okay, and that council approve an application for the Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program for the Dares Lake Dam and Spillway Upgrades Project.
So it's been moved, both recommendations together. Is there a seconder? Seconded by everybody. Councillor Fullerton, I think you got your hand up first. You got any further discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. I think you're done, Tyson, aren't you? Okay, so we'll go on to 11.6, contract award fuel and furnace maintenance. Kathleen.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation that's in your package is that council award a contract to Irving Oil for fuel supply and furnace servicing for the period of April 22nd, 2025 to March 31st, 2027, with the option to renew for one additional 2-year term as per Schedule C, which is in the package. A request for quotations for fuel, oil, diesel, and furnace maintenance was issued in anticipation of the current contract expiration. The annual value is over $100,000. Therefore, council must approve the award of the request for quotations in accordance with the town's purchasing policy. 3 submissions were received, and as noted in the package, Irving was the lowest of the 3 packages received. So the recommendation is, as I stated previously, that it is recommended that Irving Oil be awarded the tender.
Okay, there's the report. Any questions for Kathleen? Is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Move by Councillor Fulton. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Strong. Any further discussion or question on the motion? Deputy Mayor.
Just is the purchasing policy of the town that we go with the lowest bidder? Is that sort of the standard?
There are a couple of things. You will notice in the paper that was submitted by NSFM that anything that's over $133,800 in value must be tendered publicly. And then our policy says that the lowest tender has to be accepted. So the lowest tender was Irving.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. On to 12, notice of motions, information requests, and council reports. I will start on my left tonight. Councillor Fullerton.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Councillor Greek.
Just like to wish everyone a happy Earth Day.
Councillor Babineau. Councillor Strong.
People say I'm competitive. I'm sorry about that, but this is my like third notice of a future motion. Really proud of that, actually. I'm giving notice of a future motion, and it ties in with Earth Day, directing staff to create a set of election sign rules across the town of Lunenburg that prohibit placement on town-owned property, or if constitutionally unviable, to permit signage on town-owned land only by license and subject to strict regulation. The rule is intended to cut down on signs in specific areas that interfere where visibility might be compromised, and to ensure that public space is free from campaign platforms and political messaging, specifically in our public parks. This rule should clearly allow posting of signs with permission on private property. And it would be meant simply as a local rule, in addition to any provincial or federal statutes as is applicable to elections. And that staff be aware of similar legislation when doing their research in, for example, the HRM, the Muskoka region, Paradise, Newfoundland, Yellowhead, and the city of Ottawa, and whether there have been any constitutional challenges to that. The motion shall simply read that staff prepare a local rule governing placement of election signs on public lands within the town of Lunenburg.
Thank you. So that's a notice of motion, so something will come back at a future meeting then. Councillor Daphne?
This is a little early, but Friday, May 9th, the Lunenburg and District Fire Department Ladies Auxiliary is having a salad plate fundraiser. It's $15. Pickup time is between 11 and 1 at the fire hall. And for tickets, you can call Heather Hyson at 902-634, I need glasses, 9149. And secondly, I want to acknowledge the people around the table here. On October 30th of last year, we swore an oath. And immediately after that, the code of conduct came into being. And I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for upholding the rules that apply to us as councillors. I know each of us take it very seriously, and I am going to say that Lunenburg is in very good hands, and we still need the public input. We value the public input. And I'm probably going to make my father roll over in his grave right now, but I take offense to any allegation or innuendo that may be presented to us that we're not being above board with the town. I will challenge anybody on that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All good for me tonight. So we'll move on to 13 items to consider for Committee of the Whole. We have that basically set for.
Yeah, the intent of this agenda item, which is still a little bit newer, is that if council did have anything, those like more heavy discussion based items or perhaps new policies, anything kind of percolating like that, that council has this opportunity right now. Again, maybe this has to be revisited. This is before we set regular committee, I shouldn't use the word regular, but consistent Committee of the Whole meetings. So again, if council did want to see anything that they wanted to kick to Committee of the Whole for a more fulsome discussion, here's an opportunity to do it. But if not, we'll keep those agendas consistent.
Deputy Mayor.
Just a thought on the issue that was raised this evening about the bandstand. Is there, I'm not sure where we are on that, and if there's any room for consideration of, you know, design adaptations slightly from what they are to address, you know, being close to the audience or some of those things, and an opportunity to have that discussion with the groups who do make use of the bandstand. And I'm just wondering if that's a committee of the whole discussion, or that's something staff can speak to right now.
Tyson?
Through the chair, so we did receive our issue for tender documents on Monday that are likely to be posted later this week. Just because time is of the essence, and we have the pre-approved budget, and staff's priority was moving it ahead, and I think that's what we understood councils to be as well, in terms of getting the bandstand back. So that would be on repairing the existing structure with the steel, incorporating a ramp for accessibility. So, and that was staff's plan.
Thank you. And with all due respect, I think we've been talking about this now for 10 months. So the report was great that was presented tonight. It's unfortunate it wasn't presented 7 months ago, or even back in February when we were discussing this in more depth, because I think now you've said the keywords there's time is of the essence. We've pushed this off far enough down the road repeatedly. So I think we finally made the decision to go ahead. I think you've got the tender documents ready. So again, as much as I respect and appreciate the presentation tonight, it's just too bad it wasn't 6 or 7 months earlier, because I think it's past our deadline at this point. So I think in order to get it going and get it back up and running, we have to keep proceeding in the manner we are. So thank you, Tyson, for that. Councillor Strong.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I have been looking at this since we received the information earlier from Brian. How much of the actual construction is reconstruction, and how much of it is new build? I know that's going to be a difficult thing, but to me, it's a reconstruction, or it's not constructing it from, we're trying to use parts that still exist, that are, that are still viable. I think we're only replacing how much of it?
So through the chair, my understanding is, and I don't have any of my documents here, but the structural steel components in the base, that's the area of major deterioration, and that needs replacement.
So that kind of answers my question, that it's we're doing some deferred maintenance. We're not doing a new build.
Through the chair, if I'm understanding correctly, we would be using the essence of the bandstand that's there, repairing the components that are deficient or that require replacement, but a lot of the existing structure will remain as is.
Yeah, so we're not changing the design or the layout. Basically, we're going to use what we can. It's more of a renovation than it is a complete rebuild. And in that case, the money that we've budgeted and the money that we've allotted in the tender documents that went out would be much different looking now than it would if we were going to redesign and rebuild the entire bandstand. So I think we're talking about two different projects, quite frankly, with two different values at the end of it. Obviously, if we're going to spend $300,000 on renovation, a complete rebuild would be much higher, I would think. So, so I think, again, we just proceed in the manner we're going, and fingers crossed that it's ready to open at the lighting of the trees. No pressure. Again, thank you. So we'll move on to motion action list. We can confirm that's the motion action list, or we can review it again. I'll be honest, I went through the agenda twice, went through the package, and I just thought that was on there like it used to be years ago, like months ago when I was first here at the end for our review. So I really didn't look at what was crossed off or what is left. I just thought it was the new motion action list until we got talking this afternoon. So I'm certainly not prepared to speak on anything that's listed there tonight. So maybe could we defer this? There's no rush to get this presented, is it?
No, the intent there is just, we had talked about this at the April 1 Committee of the Whole, so if it reflected council's conversation based on then, things that we believe that we got the direction to remove, they're just crossed out right now. But absolutely, we can bring this back at the next one to confirm it and add things that have come up in the last couple of weeks.
I would appreciate at least an opportunity to go through it the right way, because I didn't. I just thought it was that motion action list that used to be there every agenda months ago. So if you're okay with that, we can defer to a future meeting. Thank you. 15, one more reminder, so I don't want to get blamed for not communicating. Upcoming budget meetings, Tuesday, April 29th, 6 p.m. Budget review and public input. Be here, be square. Tuesday, May 13th, 6 p.m. Budget and review public meeting number 2. It's a regular council meeting at the beginning. Be here. And then Tuesday, May 27th, 6 p.m., another scheduled budget meeting number 3. Please be here if you have any input at all on the budget. Again, and if you want to write stuff in once the budget is presented publicly, you can write into staff if you can't be here. But please, again, I'll stress the same as us around the table. This is the most important document this group has to do annually. So if you want to have some input, want to have some say in the upcoming year's plans, please review the budget when it comes out and please get back to us. If you really dig into it, it's quite an interesting document usually every year. So again, that's just a reminder. Now, nothing further. Motion to move in closed session. Moved by Councillor Babineau, seconded by Councillor Fullerton. Thank you very much, everybody.